co-anchor of CNBC's bi-coastal tech-focused program, Tech Check.
Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled and honored to be here. You know, when I got to San Francisco as a tech reporter more than 5 years ago now, I had a lot of women in tech reach out to me and offer ways to support me. It became evident very quickly that there's not enough women in tech at all levels, at the CEO level, at the founder level, at the VC level. So I'm really glad to be able to participate in this forum. And I think it's great that you guys are kind of going deeper on this and looking at women in cloud specifically. So I have 3 fantastic panelists to join me to discuss this issue. As always, please put your questions, comments in the chat. I've got one eye on it as well. So hopefully we can hear from you guys. So you've already heard from Chaitra. And she's recognized as, of course, an influential business leader. She sits on many boards, drives global conversations with United Nations and top corporations. We also have Purnima Ramuswamy, who is EVP Global Solutions and Partners at Qlik, and prior to joining Qlik, Purnima led the North American AI and Analytics practice at Cognizant. We also have Carissa Rollins. She is Chief Information Officer at United Healthcare Technology. You just heard her in that great story. She's responsible for the strategy roadmap, technology investments in support of the commercial, Medicare, and retirement, also government programs, technology, business portfolio, so a wide range there. And lastly, we also have Kamaina Cowell, and she is VP, Head of Information, Insight, and Analytics at CSL Behring. And Kamaina, I also really liked your bio. You speak 5 languages. She dreams of being a mountaineer in an alternate universe. So I love these backstories. And with that, guys, I want to hear more about the backstory. So let's jump right into it. And I want to hear sort of from all of our panelists about their personal journey. How did your experience and skills lead you into the cloud space? And don't be shy about some of the challenges too. Sometimes I think those are just as useful to hear how you've overcome it. And I can assume, you know, as a woman working here in the tech industry, that there have been some of those along the way. Carissa, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been in technology a long time, and so I've seen the evolution of many, many different technologies. And of course, going from some retailers into now the healthcare space, there's a lot of tech that we have out there that we need to get closer to the customers. We need to modernize. The industry's been around for some time, and we've got some legacy tech out there. And in order to make really our healthcare industry more member friendly and get our data and our experiences closer to our members, we needed to modernize our platforms and really get to more of a cloud-based solution. And that's what's happened in the last 5 years. It started before I came to United Healthcare, but in the last 5 years, we've made a concerted effort to modernize our platforms. We have about 1/3 of our platforms in our own private cloud. We have 1/3 on multiple public clouds. So we don't pick one or have a favorite. We have a particular way that we go about selecting. And then we have 1/3 that we're still working on. So yeah, that's how I got into it. I've got a great team of women as well as men working on the modernization. Our Chief Technology Officer is also working hard on the last 1/3 that we're trying to move as well.
Purnima, why don't we get to you next and talk about your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. I actually, honestly speaking, did not know what I wanted to do when I got out of college. So I was trying to figure out what's the next step. I realized that I just liked the fact of being in a business, running a business, and so on. So the first opportunity I got was in the data space. And I realized that data was, back in the day, it was more a backend function, but it did have its own power even then, in people realizing that it's going to help you make better decisions than stumble your way into the right decision. I stuck to the space, and I'm glad I did, because data has actually evolved from being a back office function to a board conversation today, right? So just sticking with it and understanding the nuances of it. But what I also did in my career is not, while the technology is fascinating, I focused on the implications and the impact that data could provide businesses and leaders. So I moved more towards the business of data and the business management around setting up teams to help customers leverage the power of data. And that's what I've done in my career. I've worked with teams of men and women and customers and partners to move it from a back office function and a conversation to the board, and for organizations to leverage the power. It's been called digital transformation, customer first, and all of that, but that's been a 25-year evolution in the industry, and just stuck to it.
Thanks for that, Purnima and Kamayini. What led you?
Yeah, so Deirdre, maybe my journey is sort of halfway between Chris's and Purnima's, and I'll share for what it's worth that, all of us have found our ways here, coming from so many different, paths leading to the same types of roles, essentially, across our organizations. So I started very clear, wanting to be in healthcare, passionate about healthcare. I started out being very clear that I wanted to do something with data and engineering. So came through a classic pedigree in computer science and engineering, but started in med tech and medical devices in radiology, and actually doing image reconstruction and image reconstruction and algorithmic advancements. At the time, as an engineer, you ran into compute and technology not keeping pace with the deep unstructured data sets you would get from radiology devices at the time. That segued into an interest in understanding a little bit more about the business side of data. And that led me to my next foray into a specialization in data and analytics and bioinformatics. And one thing led to another. And in my career, I've actually played from a data and analytics lens on both sides of the fence. On the technology and IT side, enabling it, but also on the functional side, trying to use it and drive products and outcomes in health, patient outcomes with it. So that's in a nutshell my journey to this day and age. And with CSL, not very different than Carissa and what she was recapping for United Healthcare. Pharma and biopharm doesn't have the cloud first DNA or digital first DNA that biotech enjoys. And so we find ourselves with this half and half world that we're living in. We want to do things with data and analytics. We want to modernize, but there's a lot of technical debt, so to speak, that we have to restructure and modernize with cloud, data first, and AI first approaches. So that's our journey and path ahead for us, specifically in CSL Behring today.
I love that perspective. And it's so important to know that, sometimes in these sort of legacy industries, the transformation is so important, but it can be slow and it can have huge payoff when it does, though. I'm reading in the chat, Doug, he says he's here. He's interested because he has 2 daughters entering college soon. And I wonder how many other people are sort of watching this and looking at the 3 of you who have become so successful in your fields. I love how you describe sort of how you got here, what you guys are doing, but what advice would you give to women, and especially those coming out of college or even younger than that are trying to break into the cloud space and technology fields overall? Carissa, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would say don't say no to any opportunity that's put in front of you, right? I think I started as a COBOL programmer. So I've come a long way from being a COBOL programmer when I got out of school, right? And you constantly have to reinvent yourself. And there were several times in my career where I had to reinvent myself by learning a new skill, by asking someone to take a chance on me when I learned that new skill, by finding teams that were utilizing that new technology or that new skill, and then asking for them to let me in, right? Please let me in and let me figure it out. And that's how my career has progressed. I've been very, very blessed and fortunate in the opportunities that have been put in front of me, and constantly reinventing myself as technology changes. So my advice to the girls is, first of all, you can do it. And don't be afraid of what's in front of you. There will be challenges, and find someone who can help and mentor you. And then don't say no to opportunities and go search them out.
I love that. And I would reiterate that mentorship is so important for women who have gone through it and have had mentors themselves. I think people would be surprised if they just ask to see that, women in the industry are so willing to do that. Purnima, what about you?
So I'm actually living proof of not saying no to anything that came my way. Very recently, my CEO asked me if I'll be a chief of staff to him because we are going through a big transformation. I know squat about being a chief of staff. I said, yep, it's a great opportunity because it gives me a bird's eye view of how to run a business. And that's what I'm looking for, the experience of running a business as a CEO, because that's a potential role I want to aspire to be. So I said, yep, I'm going to do it. I was upfront that this is my aspiration and ambition. Back to Carissa's point, ask for what you want. First of all, acknowledge what you want. There's nothing wrong with aspiring big. There's nothing wrong in being bold in your thinking and vision. Sometimes we are very, at least I used to feel hesitant about being vocal about it, even to myself, right? But the third thing also is have fun, right? Enjoy what you're doing. You might not be ready. You might not have all the skills, all the experience, all the background, but actually about 95% of people who put up their hand don't know what they're doing, what they're getting into, right? I think many a times, at least I personally, and I think a lot of women are nodding their heads, we feel like we need to be extra prepared for the next step, but that's not the case. Because if we ask for help and we are open about it, there are a lot of people, men and women, who are willing to help us and make us successful. So look for mentorship everywhere. I believe in multiple mentors, not just one, and learning from every opportunity. And the last point I'll leave you, be yourself, have fun, and focus on continuous learning. You constantly have to reinvent, like what Carissa said.
Well said. People generally want to work with people who take initiative and are having fun, right? I like that. And also, maybe people would be surprised about what they can rise up to and do. Kamaini, I saw you nodding your head along with when Purnima was speaking, I'm sure with a lot of our audience.
That's right. And then I think to extend on both what Carissa said and then Purnima also channeled in many ways, right? The mentors, the allies, think of them as like a board of directors, just like you think about a company. One size doesn't fit all. They come in different capacities and they'll complement and build you in different ways. So think about that. Think about how you're going to build your own personal board of directors. And don't hesitate. There's a lot of senior leaders who will be willing to give you the time of the day. Fortune favors the bold, is or brave, as it goes, the saying. I think the only other piece that I'll draw out in the very, very compelling advice is that, while you don't have to know what you want to do, but at least taking a short-term horizon view, saying, here is 2 or 3 things that I want to learn. Just even learn. And here is my skills, transferable, non-transferable, I bring. Make that widely known. Be upfront about it, because it will help your board of directors, your allies, and your mentors to help connect or bridge you to that next opportunity. So planning, little bit of planning, not long-term planning, just near-term planning and upfront declaration will help a lot. And to the specific question in the chat and where we started, to the young women coming up, I think technology roles and any C-suite roles in data and analytics will probably need progressively more tech awareness and tech fluency as the decades roll on forward here. Try to take the time to build depth in your early career, your first 10 years. Build depth, either functional depth or technology-specific skill set depth before you decide to branch out and go wide. And so to college entering and hopeful candidates, give that some thought. Which one are you going to choose to index on and chart a thoughtful course?
That's great advice also. And, when I started in journalism, I was given similar advice, look for a niche. And there was a lot of journalists that wanted to be, international correspondents, less so people who are willing to put in the work to become a business news reporter, which is sort of a niche that you do have to work towards and go deep in. Great answers. Kamaina, I'd love to know the board of directors, the women board of directors and men that you guys have. I never heard that before, but it's a great way of looking at it. I want to sort of, Purnima, you said something that I thought was really interesting. And I agree in one sense with you. Early on, you don't want to say no. You want to kind of take every opportunity that comes at you. But at a certain point, right, you have to sort of learn the ability to say no and pick and choose. And I find that this is sometimes a place where women have challenges with, right? You say yes to a bunch of things and then you don't want that conflict. You don't want to have to say no. So it gets hard to pull back a little bit. So Purnima, how do you sort of balance that? Now it goes to a question, another question discussion in the chat is older women. They're trying to change career, transition to the cybersecurity world, who cannot say yes to everything. How do you pick and choose? How do you balance that opportunity with the right opportunity?
Yep. And again, I'll relate it back to my personal journey because not everyone's context is the same, right? So I want to preamble it with that. So I was with one company and on the services side, professional services side with Cognizant for 19 plus years, all in the data and analytics space. And when I was looking for a change, I actually went through an exercise with a very close confidant, like what Kamayani mentioned, kind of a mini board of directors, about a couple of people, that I went about saying, what is it that I like about a role? What is it that over the years I realized I don't like about the role, right? And it was more in sense of what energizes me and what brings me down. I hate doing operational stuff. I love being in front of clients. I love being in the data and analytics space, but I was very clear that I wanted to do something different and not be in another professional services organization. So I then started looking at the opportunities that will fit what I like at 70%. You're never going to get with 100% of everything you like. There are going to be parts of your business that you hate doing or your day job that you hate doing. But that's how I started framing what I wanted, what I didn't want. And the second point, what I mentioned earlier, I was reticent in acknowledging that I do like being in control, that I do like getting visibility. I thought that it was, it was vulgar, actually. That's the word that comes to my mind, to acknowledge that I'm aiming for the top, right? But actually my board of directors, which is friends, told me, no, that, why do you think that's vulgar for you to aspire to be a CEO? Be bold, be clear about it, because then you're going to go, march towards it to look for the roles that will help you gain the skills you need to get there, right? So I transitioned from a professional services organization into a product company, having no background in a product company, right? Zero background, coming in, but being a utility player with an open mind to learn, as long as I was willing to take that risk and be able to learn and fit into their culture. And that's how I also ended up with the chief of staff role 2 years later in that company, because the organization saw the value. My CEO basically said, hey, I need a right-hand person. And I was vocal with him that my aspiration is to get into a CEO position, and that's a choice I'm making, and I want to know how it is, right? So I'd say it's, once you're 15 years or 20 years into your career, to Kamayani's point, start shaping your career based on, and for me, fun is a big factor. Am I enjoying parts of these roles? And I want to continue having fun, because otherwise we spend 14-hour days at work. If 14 hours of your life is doing dreary work and something you don't enjoy, it's not worth it. So I looked at all of those vectors, and then I've been looking at roles more than titles, if you may.
If I can, Deirdre, to the late stage aspiring to perhaps switch swim lanes functionally or within even the same function, right? I think those are the switches that you have to perhaps, at least in my personal opinion, you have to plan it a little bit more than even in your early career. And so this is where, if you chart a course for, say you declare, this is a, C-suite even level role that I want to get to in 5 years, especially if you're later in your career, you're sort of heading into that, finite window in which you want to capitalize on the runway. I think when you do that, then lay out the transferable skills, technical and non-technical and more soft skills that you're bringing into it, especially in technology. The landscape, the roadmap changes so quickly and so dynamically. There's new emergent tech on the horizon every 2 years, which is really breakthrough tech. It's not just rinse and repeat in a new formula. If you just look at that landscape, you're never going to be able to check the box on every new tech and you're trying to transition into. Today it's cyber and data. Tomorrow it might be who knows what, right? I think when you do late career stage switches or aspire, bring that into the conversation with a bold tap on the shoulder with a hiring manager and say, here's what I would bring. And here's how I plan to augment and complement where I have my technical and or other kinds of gaps. I think that is an easier and more directed perhaps self-manageable way to address a mid-career switch?
I love the message I'm hearing now. It centers a lot around being boldness, be courageous, boldness and being courageous, and just leaning in. Carissa, let me give you the last word here before we switch topics a little bit. And also, I'm interested in that balance as well, because a lot of women have, families or parents they're taking care of, other obligations. How do you put your career, make it a priority when there's all of these other competing interests? And, it may not yet be the same standards for men.
Yeah, I would say I've been very fortunate in that my husband has his own company and can make his own schedule. So throughout my career, we made that decision early. We've been married 30 years. So early in my career, we decided that I was going to be the one that was going to take precedence. And it really has been a blessing for me because it has allowed me to probably take roles that maybe others who had more to balance were not able to take. He followed me and the kids followed me here in Minneapolis. We were in Milwaukee for 28 years, so we're always on a different path and a different journey, but we set boundaries as well. As my children were growing up on, things that I was definitely going to be present for. And I was very clear with work about, when I could and could not be traveling, or when I could or could not be in a meeting because I was going to be with my family. I think you have to set those boundaries. I will say in my career that I feel like now is the best it's ever been for setting boundaries, because of what has happened with the pandemic and people realizing how important it is to set boundaries. And so I think that now is the time to decide what's important to you. I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday, and we're going to take a different role with him because he just wants to spend more time with his young children. And so why can't we find something different for him to do that doesn't require as much time? And he was very open to that. So, it goes both ways. We have to figure out how to have flexibility in our careers. And I think it's, throughout your career, you're going to have dips and valleys. But what I've always said is don't hold back with your boss. Set boundaries, be vocal about what you can and cannot do, but be there when you need to be there.
I would say ask. The answer may surprise you. I love that perspective, Chris. I remember just a quick story for me. I have 3 kids, but when I was pregnant with my first, I went to my boss. My job is on TV. I'd have to be pregnant, with a big belly. And I was very nervous. I said, I'm pregnant. How does that change my position? And I still remember this so well. He said, I love having moms work for me. They're some of the most efficient people that work for me. There's no drama. They may not work the longest hours, but they are so efficient. And I remember that it does sort of, not just if you're a mother, but all these competing things in your life when you get older requires you to be more efficient. And like you said, Chris, when you set boundaries, it may surprise you that people are willing, bosses, mentors are willing to work with you. Great conversation. I'm also looking at in the chat, which is great. Keep these comments coming. I want to get to Vishwa, who just asked, as someone with very little tech background, how important is it? This is a great question, to have an IT computer science education. What resources have helped you guys? Purnima, let's get back to you.
Interestingly, I don't have a Comp C background. I'm a BSc math major, and then I did my MBA. I learned technology because it's interesting for me and data. But like I said, for me, it was about the power of data and what it can do. So I got into the business side of data. I do believe, I think Kamayani mentioned this earlier, it's about identifying that niche and making sure that you equip yourself to become that brand ambassador and can stand out from a crowd. I don't think in my personal opinion, it has nothing to do with the educational qualification alone. It's how we filter out, and the entire world has to change that approach. I think with the Great Recession, everyone's learning that. It is important at some level, maybe, depending on the role that you're pursuing. If you want to become an AI scientist, you clearly need possibly a master's or a PhD, right? But if you're looking at, there are other things to be done in the data and AI and BI space. It's managing a business, building a business, and those are transferable skills. Those are general management skills. So it depends on the role that you aspire, and then make yourself ready. Not make yourself ready, make sure that you can excel in that role.
Maybe if I can just add on to that, because I see several questions on this topic in the chat. At United, over the last, I'd say, year and a half, 2 years, we've started working with some of our partners on boot camps where we're actually taking individuals, any age, right, that want to get into tech and putting them through boot camps and then placing them on our teams. And so we're very excited to see what the outcome for these folks is going to be. It's been super successful so far. We're really excited about it. And some of these, some have 4-year degrees in like marketing or, something else. And it was great. Probably about 3 months ago, I went to a happy hour with one of the classes and I just walked around and I said, what were you doing before, you went to the boot camp? And the answers ranged from fast food to I was running an IT help desk. Like it was all over the board. And again, they did a boot camp. We're really excited to see, what happens over the next couple of years with this group. And we're continuing to do the same. And there's tons of, now that we've done this, I've found so many other companies here in the Minneapolis area that are doing the same. There's just a real shortage of technical skills out there, people, right? And so we're looking in very non-traditional places to add people to our team.
I can tell you it's a big topic for us at CNBC, the labor shortage. And exactly, if people show an interest to want to learn, a lot of employers are willing to teach. Kamaini, jump in here.
I was just going to add 2 other points to the labor shortage point as well, Deirdre, that you don't need a formal degree. You want to bring that I can do and I am willing to learn and I'm a continuous learner attitude. Especially in CXO level roles, if you look at data and analytics and any flavor of a CXO data and analytic role today, you don't have to be a PhD, right? At some point, any C-suite level role is less about your technical capabilities and chops and more about your business acumen and your ability to influence, drive, set vision, and bring a village behind you, an enterprise behind you to rally behind the mission. Right. So I think to all of this, the points that both Chris and Purnima made, right? Just understand that depending on the company and the CXO level role that you're aspiring to, and if it's in data and analytics, they come in very different shapes and sizes. There is a home for you. The question is, how are you going to find that home that has the right marriage for your skills and what you're bringing?
If I may just share a little bit of a factoid for everyone to Kamaini's point on data and analytics and, a lot of CXO roles. I did this research around chief data officer roles and titles. That's the only CXO role that has more than 50% women. And the reason, when you drill down further into it, the reasons for that are, some of the points that Kamaini mentioned. It's a chief data officer requires strong collaboration across the organization. You require strong communication. And you always have a limited budget. And who does that at home? Strong collaboration across multiple priorities, communicating to get everyone geared towards the same end goal, and you're always short of meeting everyone's needs with your budget. Right? And that's one of the reasons why women succeed more in that kind of a role. And increasingly more roles require those 3 skills. And of course, you need to be empathetic as well. Right? So I do believe that women need to believe in themselves that these are the capabilities that are important to be a leader and drive strategy and bring everyone together. And we do it naturally. We do it every day in our lives.
Yeah. Well said from a chief of staff, Purnima. I want to get into how sort of data and AI are shaping the decisions that your companies are making. But first, I do want to get to Noelle's question. I think it's a good one. She asked, do the panelists feel that they've gotten the same support and growth freedom from male bosses as female bosses? This question always comes up when I moderate panels like this. So interested to hear sort of what your guys' experience has been. Carissa, let's start with you.
Absolutely. I think I've had the same support. In some cases, I haven't had as much support from women bosses as men bosses. And what I say about that is when I talk to my ladies my mentor and the group that I run is, don't close the door behind you. That's what happens sometimes, at least in the past. I think it's gotten a lot better is when we get to a certain level, women in their careers, we close the door behind us and we make it more difficult for other women to get there. And I've been a strong proponent of do not close the door, like keep it wide open and help people run through it. So I would say my experience has been equally good and equally bad, right? In some cases, there has been no distinction between the two.
Fair enough. Great insight. Kamaini, go ahead. See you kind of going back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, I would say that I think my difference is my experience has been a bit different, but I think this may also be a function of generally underrepresented gender underrepresentation in functions that are high science or high tech, right? I think this is not the case in other functions, and so I think my experience has been a little different. But it's not to say that it hasn't started to change and that it's turning the corner. And it's turned much more radically around the corner in the last 3 years as we realized what a big chasm of equity, gender equity, and rebalancing that equation in a corporate setting that we need to address collectively. So I think the 2000s, I would say I had very, very personal, memorable, and shareable experiences offline in a later context and setting where I didn't feel like the female bosses necessarily were as supportive. But I think that that's changing. And I think we're realizing generationally, especially in these more science, tech, and IT types of careers, that there's such a big shortage. That we don't start to lead differently and keep that door open behind you and find a way to pay it forward, we're not going to fix this for other probably 6 generations to come.
Mm-hmm.
Purnima, last word on this. You want to jump in?
I've had support from men and women, both personal, professional, peers, above, below. So I don't think I have anything to complain about. I'd say the bigger point for me was people didn't look at gender as a factor when I was growing up in my career. It was not because of my gender or despite my gender that decisions were being made. I was just being looked at, am I fit for a role? What do I need to do to succeed? I think that's what helped me, because it was never in the back of my mind about my gender being a factor. But I do know that that's not the case for a lot of people and a lot of women. And I think that's the responsibility that I carry, right? Or all of us carry, of saying, paying it forward. How do you make sure, because that is a factor today in many cases. So, and one thing, of course, that has frustrated me over my career is when women come back, when women are having their first babies or their second babies or growing their families, and they come and ask for help, the first response is, we'll move you to a support function. That frustrates me, because that just means it's lazy leaders, it's lazy managers who can't be creative about how to solve for the problem, rather than relegating someone to a side gig, if you may, and not the core of the business. I'd say that's more laziness and lack of creativity, rather than applying to say, how can you structure your team and the work to make that woman thrive in that role?
So what do you think women should do in that situation, Purnima? If they get that response, how can they avoid that? How can they get back, hit the ground running?
Both as women and as someone who possibly would ask, I would say you need creativity, and it's okay to go and ask, but also go back with options, right? To say, right, okay, I think this kind of a role in the core of the business will help. I'll be able to do only A, B, and C, but I believe this is how it can actually help us, and this is how we structure the team, right? Sometimes we just leave the solutioning up to the person you ask, but I believe we also play a role in coming up with options and solutions.
Yeah, go with the roadmap. That's
exactly
good advice.
Yeah.
I do want to get to sort of the business of what you guys are looking at, data and artificial intelligence. And we talk about this a ton, how the way it's developed is so important. There's issues of gender discrimination, misrepresentation, the whole ethics side of this. So I wonder, what are some of the things that your organizations are doing to preserve ethics in automated decision-making? Purnima, let's start with you on this. I think this was something that you wanted to raise.
Interestingly, we are a data and analytics platform company, right? So, our platform actually helps customers embed insights, make data, make decisions through insights and action. And one thing that we are very deliberate about is recognizing that automated decisioning is more only for areas which are going to be less impactful for people, in terms of there's less subjectivity in the decision-making process. So the approach that we take is more augmented and embedded decisions, and less about taking the human out of the loop. And then the creation of those decisions needs more transparency. So our platform gives that that transparency on what data are you using, what kind of input points are helping you drive those decisions, and what's the lineage of that data, who touched this, creating more opportunities to collaborate while creating those insights as well, rather than saying, okay, now the data is there, the decision has been made, how do you correct the process because we screwed up, right? We don't want to take a, oops, we screwed up approach and then go and fix it. We are saying the process itself needs to make sure that there are controls and governance and ability to get that transparency. So that's how we are thinking about creating the platform that we have. And that's what we've been doing through all of our investments and so on.
Carissa, how are you thinking about it? And such a different use case, right? At a healthcare company, I can imagine the challenges.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the way we think about it is we have a governance committee that's really looking at all of the initiatives that we have around AI, where we're making sure the data sets are inclusive and that we're coming out with the right answer. So governance is our answer, right? We're very careful to make sure that we've got folks that understand what the data is, the lineage of the data, and making sure it's right. But I would say the other real big opportunity in healthcare is not maybe so much about the actual care data itself, but it's about the process of healthcare, which causes, sometimes healthcare to be difficult and expensive. And there's tons of opportunity to really automate using AI and ML, many of the processes that are in the healthcare chain, I would say, of getting care, that we are constantly looking at, that, there's low hanging fruit there for us to really grab onto. And we're looking at that all the time and executing on some of those things all the time.
Kamaina, do you want to have the last word on this question?
Yeah, I think I'll just add one more thing that, I think it is about adaptive governance, right? We want AI. Everybody needs AI to accelerate up that maturity and as well as, embedding it in the way we do business as a society. But I think adaptive governance is the key. And there are tools and technologies and platforms like what Purnima is representing in Qlik that will help us get there. But just be declarative about where there is unfettered ability to go approach a set of data problems with AI that doesn't need a hammer approach on ethics and overbearing governance. And then the basket of use cases where you do need it. And you do need, not just because it's personal data or sensitive data sets, but because it won't stand the litmus test if you did, a sniff and screen test on the New York Times on ethics and just reputational damage. So taking that adaptive approach to which set of use cases can you unleash an accelerated approach on? And then for the delta, use that governance and enable the governance with tooling, right? Many solutions out there, especially for AI in healthcare. We are starting to see emergence of new tech and solutions that will allow full anonymization, as well as federated AI learning being enabled to ensure privacy of health data and compliance with privacy data laws the globe over. So I'll leave it at that.
Purnima, are you optimistic that data and artificial intelligence will be sort of a net benefit to society, to businesses? There's always been this debate, especially, its use in surveillance and others that are not, so good. So I wonder, at this point in time where we are right now, are you optimistic that that set of governance, the ethics are moving in the right direction as the technology continues to develop?
I believe for any issue, you first need to acknowledge that, you've got work to do to make sure it moves in the right direction. And I think now there is a lot of awareness and understanding that ethics, ethics, equity, diversity is important, not just in the end game of AI, but in the creation of AI as well, right? So the first step is acknowledging that there could be a problem, and then you then start solutioning. So I'm optimistic because there is awareness and there is work that's going on, not just by private commercial entities, but more importantly, government involvement as well. Because I do believe that this will move in the right direction only with strong private-public partnership. It cannot be one or the other. Both need to support each other to move this in the right direction. And it's not about curbing innovation. right? Sometimes it becomes the zero sum game or 0 or 1 game. Look at that other person, remove all of the controls, give us unfettered access to all data, don't govern us, and we'll show all the innovation. You can't go to that extreme. At the same time, you can't be scared of the consequences and not do anything. There needs to be that balance, right? So I am optimistic, provided there is this public-private partnership and we continue coming up with solutions that will solve for the risks that are there.
Carissa, I'm curious, who do you tend to work with? I'm sure it's a whole range, but there's this idea that it's a tricky spot for the big tech giants to be in, right? And especially sort of the scrutiny from government versus some of the smaller AI data companies. How do you balance that? Who do you typically work with? And what do you look for when you decide to partner with a company?
We work with everybody.
I thought so.
We're a big company, but we do a lot ourselves. I mean, we've built our own platform for AI development. So we do a lot of things on our own, but then I don't think there's a label that we don't have in-house. I'd be surprised. But we do pick and choose, vendors for certain things that we want to work on together, like Accenture. Obviously, we do a lot in member centricity and consumer facing initiatives, anything that's strategic, we're working with them. But from an AI perspective, we built our own platform that our developers use. So we do partner with some other AI companies as well, but again, we try to, because it's such a sensitive topic and we have the most data probably of any company in the healthcare industry, we want to control that space.
Great. And Kamaini, we've only got a few minutes left, so I want to make sure I get to this question, which I think is a really good one. Can you talk a little bit about difficulties, if you have experienced them, in building consensus across, leaders at your organization to disrupt the data landscape and architecture? How do you navigate that? What do you look for? What do those conversations sound like?
Yeah, very much the kinds of conversations we're having right now. Like I was saying at the onset of our session today, that we have technical debt. A lot of our realities look like Carissa's, in that your old tech doesn't allow for a good breeding ground for AI acceleration. And so 3 things that I have found are helpful in starting to see these conversations. And these types of conversations do, unfortunately, have to start at the top of the house, because you're not going to garner just bottoms up organic swell of change and I'll call it advocacy. It has to come top down. And so the 3 things that we have found effective, and I wouldn't say that our journey is quite done yet and we've hung our boots on it, is educate, to get to a future utopian utilization of AI. And by the way, the potential for AI, the upside from AI versus the downside from AI in healthcare is endless, boundless. And I think everybody can relate with it on the heels of the pandemic and the response the globe over for that from a healthcare value chain perspective for the patient. So I think for us, the 3 things that I think have worked is educate. Get your senior and middle management to go beyond the buzzwords. Become buzzword comprehending. What is the value and potential that AI and data-first approaches can get you, whether it be in terms of revenue unlock and/or operational cost reductions and efficiency gains? The second is, once you get them sold on the value, then show them what it takes to get it done, right? So this is the education that a lot of people understand or have heard the words, but they don't really know what it takes to get that AI to work. The volume, the high veracity data, the high quality data, the challenges of a mucky patchwork quilt or technology debt. It doesn't let you scale your AI quick enough. Sure, platform plays and solution vendors will sell you. So this is where, you have to be able to sell and educate why you need to refactor, why that patchwork quilt needs to look different. And you need to invest in some significant, sustained discipline investments around regutting your technology, your infrastructure, and organizing differently. And at the end of the day, this had better be tied to your corporate strategy and business outcomes.
Yeah, that's really, if I can just pile onto that for a second. We do an education session for our executives because they don't understand why it's so hard for us to get at the data that we need. And for those of us who are at companies that have legacy tech, your data is trapped in those transactional systems that you've been growing and feeding and carrying for years. but you can't get the data out in a quality, rationalized way to actually make it be effective in the use of AI and ML. I mean, we've gotten a lot better, obviously, but the first step in that is an education session on why it's so hard to get it to be effective in getting that data out of those trapped transactional systems. And just because you have a data warehouse, that's not going to help you either. So, right?
Yeah, it's a great point. I wanted to save a little bit of time, but I think we're out actually. But Kamaini, when you mentioned buzzwords, I thought of metaverse. I wanted to get your guys' opinions on, and when you hear this, it seems to encompass everything right now. But if you hear this from execs saying, what is it? But I'm so glad that at least in the last 45 minutes, we have been able to really get specialized, dig into some of the issues, some of the successes that you guys have faced, and what's on the horizon. So, it's been an honor just to listen in and learn from the three of you. So again, thank you to Accenture for asking me to do this. I'll wrap it up there. I believe there's breakout sessions after this for those that are watching. Great questions too. Thank you to the audience.